Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendie V, and in season 3, we're redefining success for social entrepreneurs looking to grow their revenue. If you have reality-changing ideas, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. How do you define sustainability, and how do you do it for a business or a nonprofit? Well, my guest today, Dave Feldman, is going to teach us exactly what his perspective is on all of these things. I'm excited to interview one of my colleagues and new friends who is bringing our thinking to a whole new level in the Bethesda Green space and another organization he's going to tell us about as well. Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you and say our first question, which is, who are you and how do you make an impact?
Good morning, Wendie. First of all, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for all the good work that you do to elevate impact in the world. I think it's an important attribute that we need to actually embed in everything that we do, and that's actually part of my answer. You talk about sustainability. Sustainability is a big word with so many different definitions and so many different perspectives. In the shortest sense, people talk about sustainability, what works for today's generation, as well as the future, or sometimes without compromising the future. A lot of people are looking at sustainability as saying, how do we even make the world better today? And in the future as well. Sustainability has a couple of different lenses. One, from an environmental standpoint, you look at the people, planet, profit. You have to address all of those three elements when you're making a decision, whether it's a manufacturing decision or development decision. I want to take a step back and look at sustainability and look at it saying it's really a holistic approach to looking at any kind of decision that you make. People, planet, profit is one lens, but there's so many others. And it just allows you to start saying it's not about my own world, but it's about looking at others in the world as well and making sure that you integrate that as well. So there's a lot of different definitions. There's one that was kind of created by the Brundtland Report years ago, which is kind of the defining one. It's a little bit kind of bureaucratic, but it actually defines the world and, with very sustainability terms. But it's really just stopping and looking at everything's connected. It's really, it's complicated. Yeah. So stop and looking and stop, don't look at the world through your own lens. Look at other people's and try to make sure that everybody's needs, including Mother Nature, is integrated.
I love that we started the conversation right there, because that is, I think, where I say sustainability is a vibe, because for me, it's an ongoing process that especially organizations have to go through in order to know where they want to be in the future to support their work. And I think as a business or a nonprofit, we use that word in so many different ways, it becomes squishy almost. Yeah. And it's hard to define. So thank you for popping right in with, here's my perspective. Let's get back to who is Dave? The key question, who is Dave and how does Dave make an impact in a sustainable way? That's what I want to know.
Who is Dave is almost as complicated as sustainability. It's like, who are we? I'm somebody who's been in this space for, I like to think, social impact for a number of different years. I'm many different things. I'm a husband, a father, a community member, a lot of different things. In a professional sense, I'm somebody who's dedicated my career, certainly the last 25 years or so, is to trying to do both that well and good at the same time. I'd like to think a pretty fascinating career. I was in the tech sector for a while back in the late 90s, took a ride up and then took a ride down. And that was quite an adventure. Ended up working at the British Embassy for 5 years in charge of their economic development team, helping U.S. companies set up in the U.K. and U.K. companies export to the U.S. And that was actually quite defining. That's actually where I found the world of, quote, sustainability, where the Europeans were doing a lot to address their environmental, their energy challenges. We in the United States weren't at the same level. And I started realizing it's like, okay, what can we do to kind of meet the aspirations of other areas that are doing things well? And through that process, I started launching these initiatives. I used to call them livability hubs, where in every community, everybody wants to live in a place that's vibrant, that has good jobs, that has outdoor green space, that has a good quality of life, that has, I believe, strong community. I think people connected is a big asset. So how do you create those? So through a lot of the Europeans, I kind of came up with this idea that you would actually build these centers that people would come together, almost like a community center of sort, to address complex issues around sustainability. having meaningful conversations, initiating projects and programs, and really kind of catalyzing all those things that we sometimes struggle with as communities. Did that for a number of years, and then actually left probably in 2014. I started an organization, Bethesda Green, which we'll share a little bit about. Left that and then ended up joining with my wife, starting another nonprofit for a while, doing personal and professional development and growth. And that was really exciting as well. And have now come back to Bethesda Green. Sadly, our previous executive director passed away suddenly, and the board has asked me to come back. And it's really wonderful to be back, not under obviously those circumstances, but it's a wonderful community working in Montgomery County and the DC area and helping elevate sustainability at all levels.
Are you tired of investing in courses that you don't finish? Wondering where to get on-demand professional development to grow an impact organization? I just made your search so much easier. Head to my online store, learngrowthrive.wendyveloz.com. This is where you can access our learning paths, a curated set of on-demand resources for grant writing, social business, holistic business, and nonprofit growth. If you're curious what's inside each learning path, explore them now at learngrowthrive.wendyveloz.com. Yeah, and I found Bethesda Green by accident because I had a lunch with a colleague. I don't even think I told you this story. I had lunch with a colleague who said, come to this talk. I think it's your vibe. It sounds like something you do. I don't really know exactly if this is your vibe, but it's tonight. And I was like, sure. And then I show up and it's totally my vibe. And so for people who have never heard of Bethesda Green or even what a green space is doing in a community, like you were saying, helping to bring people together, all these different facets, I think folks are maybe used to business incubators and what that looks like. But you're a little of both. You're doing a lot of different things in a very cool space. So could you tell us a little bit more about even how did you come up with this model? How did the nonprofit start? Get into the history of Bethesda Green a bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for elevating the vibe, because I think vibe is really important. And personally, I believe in any workplace, culture is really important. And culture is not always easy to create sometimes. The old joke, it's hard to create trust. It's easy to destroy it. At the foundation is trust. It's really about creating a unity and a cohesive environment. And sometimes that gets challenging when you do a lot of different things under one roof. And Bethesda Green is that kind of a place. So if you can distill it down to 3 words, that makes it easy. So our words are educate, incubate, and initiate. So we are actually a physical space. We're on top of a bank branch. It was a Capital One bank branch in downtown Bethesda that has been converted into a showcase, a demonstration hub for sustainability on many levels. And what do? We educate. We educate and work with businesses. We work with the community members. We work with government officials. We work with advocacy groups. We can talk more about this, but sustainability is complicated. And it's as much as everyone says, electric vehicles versus fossil fuels. Yes. However, there are nuances to any kind of decision that you make. So how do we have meaningful conversations about what works in some places, which might be different in others? And, understanding all those, again, that holistic approach, education. Incubation means that we actually are a green business incubator. We work with startups and potentially soon to come even more at the idea stage of creative folks that have this idea that they might want to generate. And we help them bring it to fruition through a variety of resources. We help people look and find capital. We don't provide the capital. We provide all sorts of mentoring types of resources. We provide a physical space, not only for them just to have an office, but for places to come and innovate and collaborate, where people learn and share and identify best practices together. So there's a whole incubator component. We actually have a number of companies that are actually in this next round of our incubator. And there are some really interesting innovators that some of them are pushing the boundaries of what's traditional business. And then the last is initiate. And that's actually one of my favorites. It's like, these things are actually quite challenging sometimes. We're actually working on a big compost program potentially for organizations that have an extreme amount of food waste. There's actually a number of food banks, and they do amazing work about giving out food to community members, but there's also a lot of food waste. Well, there's no place to easily and affordably dispose of those products. So we're out there talking to the private sector, to the government. We're out there looking at different types of opportunities. We bring the stakeholders together to have these kind of charrettes or working groups where people have these conversations, and we build and catalyze this conversation. And, although there's lots of groups that might be doing these things independently, they work sometimes in silos. We're that silo breaker. So, that's what we do. We're 16 years old, so we've done a whole range of different programs, from energy to food to waste and waste reduction, green buildings, green city planning. I mean, we open up ideas for people to come to us. And if we can support them and work with them collaboratively, then that's kind of what we do. So you can see there's a vibe there. I'm a pretty high energy guy, which, I'm only on my 1.5 cups of coffee. But, we try to actually bring enthusiasm into our day-to-day operations all the time.
I love that. And it's very synergistic. I was enthralled when I saw a person I met in Baltimore. One of our previous podcast guests, Devin Thorpe, had an event on crowdfunding. And I learned through your presentation that one of your incubator businesses was one of the businesses that was also looking at a crowdfunding solution. And we had met several months before. And I said, wow, this is a magical place, because it really is drawing like-minded people, but it's also drawing people from around this DMV, DC metropolitan area to Bethesda. And Bethesda is, when you think about it, for people who are not in this area, it's a community that has a lot of business center. It's known for affluence, but there also are smaller businesses, and there are disparities in Bethesda, and people don't realize that on the outside. But I love that you're drawing people from even further than Montgomery County to come and have these kinds of conversations, because sometimes it is a neighborhood conversation. Sometimes it's a county conversation. Sometimes it's a regional conversation, but community looks different. And I love that you're bringing this synergy together. I think that's amazing.
And Wendie, it's interesting, that you say that, about Bethesda. It's the organization started in Bethesda. We do a lot to serve Bethesda. We actually do a lot to serve beyond Bethesda as well. And as we've come back and done a bit of a revisioning of our strategy, there is a role for our organization, even with the name of Bethesda and Green, to expand our focus and have an influence in areas, particularly in underserved communities. We're actually doing a number of work projects right now. We run the county's Green Business Certification Program, for example. So we work with businesses. Now, that program happens to be in Montgomery County. Other programs are serving the broader DMV, where we're a big voice and a partner of other organizations. But in Montgomery County, first of all, the diversity is pretty remarkable in general, but there's a highly Hispanic-speaking population. And we've gotten some grants and some funds to actually start working with small businesses in Wheaton, in White Oaks, and other areas that don't often get the resources and the attention that Bethesda might. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag being in a place. Bethesda is a wonderful town. It's not actually a incorporated city with a lot of resources, but we also realize that there's a responsibility to work with and serve other areas as well. And we've actually taken that quite seriously. So that's been kind of our mission going forward.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating, because there are other green kind of, I guess, incubators or spaces in the community as well, others in this region. And from what I understand is they all kind of have a different flavor. Yours is very much around entrepreneurship and supporting businesses and kind of the community business thriving, which I think is great. That's what this podcast is all about. How do we break barriers between nonprofit, community, and business, and what business sector could be doing to support others? And so I'm curious, how do you convince businesses that this is important stuff? Because some business owners really are just looking at profit, and they're not thinking about the impact that they have with their business, like you're saying, waste-wise and other tangible things, but also just the influence of being in a community that does have disparities.
It's a multifaceted challenges, and the word convince is interesting as well. I would say our first step is to work with those businesses that already want to do something good, but they don't know how. And often there's a lot of, as I said before, it's complex. So for example, even setting up a composting program, there could be, if you don't set up the right program, you could have mice or other critters in your area or things like that. You can get fined. The costs can be prohibitive if not done properly. And it might even be an extra cost. However, there's a cost reduction because you're paying for your waste removal. So now you're just paying for it in a different capacity. So part of it is just helping people who want to make a difference and do good understand what the options are. And I like what you said earlier about your colleague in Baltimore. A lot of it is about sharing best practices because there are groups that have done things well, and often they're the ones who can share. They've been the ones out in the front line. They've done things first. They have a lot of knowledge, both the pluses and the minuses of what they can contribute to others. Then there's that middle tier that people are interested in. They might be interested, but it's not really high on their radar. Then there is a little bit of education, convincing. I'd like to say encouragement about what are the business cases for it. Often it's driven by economics, energy efficiency, water efficiency. The word efficiency often means you're using less of something. There might be an upfront cost and you have to pay for that product over a longer period of time. But things like solar have payback periods where at some point, once you reach that payback period, now it's profitable. So helping people understand that and looking at where incentives are. There's a Montgomery County Green Bank, for example. So there is actually financing options. So it really is about helping them understand those kinds of things. And then there's a third party that maybe has no interest whatsoever. But strangely enough, sometimes, we have this really weird thing because we are a business incubator. And because we are actually supporting business, I'm not going to say it from a political standpoint, but we kind of meet the needs of all perspectives in society. And I can talk to somebody who's partly more conservative and say, we're creating jobs, we're creating businesses. And it's actually a lever or a gateway into a conversation that some of those businesses might not have. And people are interested in different things. HVAC people are interested in technology. Other people are interested in outdoors. They might be interested in plants. Some people might be interested in roads and bike lanes so there's actually a lot of entry points or gateways into this conversation. So businesses have different motivations. The other nice thing is that we actually help promote them once they get certified and start doing good things. We are helping with the county and other groups to elevate the work that they do. And most businesses kind of like that concept.
Yeah, I think that's a strong business case. I totally buy in, obviously, but I'm already a social.
I figured you would. You're already on this side. Right?
I'm already a social business. I'm one of those ones that needs no convincing. But I did a workshop recently where I had a room full of chamber members who we were talking about this, and it seems like some people also struggle to use that information in their marketing. And I like what you said, where you're saying you're promoting these businesses because of their efforts in this area. And what I've heard from other business owners is, well, I do it out of the goodness of my heart and I don't need any gratitude for it. I don't need any recognition. And I don't want to put it out there and have people think that I'm doing it for the recognition. So can you offer any advice to folks to think about, well, if that's their perspective, how could you maybe ease into leveraging your impact to support your business?
It's available for the taking. Some businesses, it's really interesting. It becomes core to their value proposition. Mom's Organic Market. Very much who they are. Honest Tea, which is now rebranded as Just Iced Tea. It's less sugar, organic. There are businesses that are doing things that are kind of core to their business model. And I'll throw this out there just because, I'm happy to share it, but there's businesses that might not necessarily be considered green. Fitzgerald Auto, they do some pretty amazing things. They're actually going through a certification process right now. And when you walk in their showroom, they have this big sign about how much oil, how many tires and things like that they recycle. So it's up to the business how they want to be conveyed. Some of them are much more, some of them are coming straight away. And that's the first question is like, how are you going to, how can you elevate me? How can you escalate me? Others, they just want to do it because sometimes they have maybe a more concentrated millennial workforce, and some of their staff are saying, you know what, that's what I want. And they know they need to do that to attract and retain good employees. So, they have different motivations. We provide it for them if they want it. Most of them do appreciate the extra recognition in different ways. We have an event coming up with the county where probably we've pushed it off until January of 2025, but we'll be doing it annually, where we get the side of a ride-on bus. It's actually on 200 buses for a period of a month. And everybody who's Green Business Certified will have their logo on that ad. People love to see their logo drive by on a bus. It's like, it's the little things sometimes that make a big difference. I look at you, you're smiling, it's not even your logo.
No, and the thing I laugh at is like, you, as a business owner, especially a small business, you wouldn't be able to afford that marketing. You would never get that kind of play. Right. So coming together and aggregating, like you were saying, it's a great way to achieve that.
And Wendy, that's actually a really big point. The aggregating piece is a really part of it. I think as much as sustainability means many different things, the aggregating, the community, we all live in towns and cities together. So we all need to address it. It goes back to my original point, it's like, wow, there's 25 organizations all on this bus. I'm part of something, and I've done my share. And somebody can look up there and say, hey, we're part of a community that's all like-minded. It's not political. We're trying to make a place that's better to live for everybody. It's really just kind of a foundational goal that we all have as people and businesses.
Yeah. And I do want to go back to your shout out to Fitzgerald Auto, because in the presentation that I gave, someone gave that as an example of a local brand that's doing their communicating and actually putting themselves out there. And I was like, I think that's brilliant. Having a commercial, having a plan, having measurable ways to make an impact. That's exactly what it's all about. And when you're using those measurable examples to do your marketing, it just throws fuel on your fire, because you will have values aligned clients. And then you add in the retention of employees, and it's only the business case just gets better and better, right? So, when the things that we're talking about today, they're not gimmicky. These are real business strategies. These are things that any business can layer in. And they're also things that nonprofits need to think about, because from the flip side of a nonprofit, they're often asking for money and volunteers and things, but it's hard for them to know, like you were saying, what is this business passionate about? Does that align with my nonprofit? And can I do work with them? Can I have some maybe deeper conversations with them? And how do I enter into that? And I think there's still this missing link between exactly what you said. What is the entrepreneur business component? What are they passionate about? And how do they want to give? And how are these nonprofits out here able to connect and plug into that? And how is the community able to benefit as well?
Yeah. I think a big takeaway is that really is interesting to me is that anybody can do things. It's not, you don't have to have a specific product. You're like, well, my business, I'm an accounting firm. What am I going to do? There's a lot you can actually do. We are working with the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber, which is an organization that represents business. Several of the local chambers love what we're doing, and they want to introduce it to their members. They're an association. What is it that makes them green? Well, they have a lot of things that they can do, and as a nonprofit or as that model. So I think the challenge is, stop, think about it. What is it that you do? What process can you change? It's kind of, it's a basic thing. It's about, you have your energy, you have your pollution, you have, where do you buy things? Where do you dispose of things? There's probably 20 questions that you can ask. And in answering those 20 questions, not a single person could not find, that's a double negative, but you know what I'm saying, at least 5 to 6 things that they can do.
Oh, Dave, we were going to have a whole meeting about this list, and then we were going to put it out there. We were going to come back on this podcast and talk about it. So I want to get to a couple of things that I know I need to get to in the last couple of minutes that we're talking. One, I want people to understand you as a person in your journey and well-being. And 2, I want to talk about Virtues Matter, which is, we kind of teased earlier, the nonprofit work that you've done. So tell us first, how do you maintain your well-being so that you can show up and serve all these other people? And then roll into what's going on with Virtues Matter.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Well-being, goodness gracious. That was, I'm glad you asked me this question now, not 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic when well-being was not not at my best. I think well-being is something that's a kind of a journey that we're all on. That life throws things at us at irregular times, and it's how we handle those things. I've learned to do a number of regular practices that keep me grounded. Life gets full and fast and every day, so I try to carve out 45 minutes to an hour every morning just to do things that I like to do. Don't tell everybody I like to start off playing Wordle in the morning. That's one of those things, and connection. So I do. It's kind of easing myself into bed. It's kind of teasing my brain. I read. I'll do some positive book works, reading from different books. I try to work out every day, 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes every single day. I journal sometimes. I would wish I did more, but I try to make that a regular practice. So, it's really just doing things that you love. And then every day, the evenings, I try to find something. I call it honoring my spirit. I love to cook. I love to do different things. Finding joy, because if you don't, it's full. So that's part of well-being. During the pandemic, I found myself for the first time in my life seeing a therapist. I was never a strong believer, not a believer, but just never really had a need for it. But it was vital for me. Long story, but just my professional life and just everything kind of came to a standstill like for many. And financially, I was probably in one of the biggest challenges that I've ever had. And I really struggled to get out of that. And it took a while and, kind of hit me in a way that I had never hit before. So now looking back on it, I respect it. And I always, also have more empathy for other people who are going through challenges. I think, people go through different periods of life where they go through different things. So yeah, well-being is it's an ongoing process, but just taking care of myself. I happen to have two worlds I love working in as well. And then speaking of well-being, the other world is a little bit about well-being. In between my stints at Bethesda Green, my wife, who had been doing this work for many years, we started an organization called Virtues Matter. And I know that sounds like an odd thing, but we talk about virtues as being something that helps us be at our best at all times. And virtues are things like resilience. What does resilience look like in practice? How do you practice it every day? Gratitude. What does joyfulness look like? How do you practice perseverance, strength, dedication, commitment, and things like that? So we actually look at these as practices. There's actually some strategies. One is even speaking the language of virtues. How do you speak to yourself and others using language that uplifts? It's a very powerful thing. My wife does a lot of facilitated workshops and helps people, integrate that into their organizations as well. Creating core values. How do you live those values? How do you create boundaries sometimes when you're not doing that? How do we listen to each other to be heard? So it's, we kind of laugh. She looks at me and she goes, "You're the planet, I'm the people." But we're kind of both trying to say, how can we just do something good and elevate the world? So that's, we have an app. I'm not going to plug it, called Virtues Cards. And if you're interested, virtuescards.org. It allows you to actually do a virtues pick every day and just learn about what these things look like and then how to apply them in your life.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And we're going to have to interview your wife and hear more about her work in this space because I don't have enough time to dig into where I want to. But I think
got more energy than I do.
I know. I'm like, bring her on. Let's go. The thing I think that's really cool about this is now I'm seeing this thread with social emotional learning and early in the education environment, teaching kids these skills, these, similar to virtues pillars. But adults aren't learning them and they're not enacted in the workspace. And this is a cool way for adults to start getting into the understanding of how can I enact this in my day-to-day life?
It's interesting, Wendie, and from that standpoint, I'm glad you brought social emotional learning because my wife is an educator, and that's a term that they come and use. And a lot of people push back on that. I mean, in our society, we're very much about STEM. We're about the hard technologies, and driving this. But if your teachers aren't well, they can't be best for your students as well in many ways. So I think this emotional discussion is starting to gain a little bit of traction. I'm a big Brené Brown fan. She wrote a book called, what is it, the Atlas of Emotions, or it's something, I can't remember the name, but exactly it's about that, helping people use the language. People know 3 emotions: happiness, sadness, and anger, but there's dozens of different emotions. It's interesting that I do find that a lot of the work that has been done through our virtues work, probably 75 to 80% are women. So I think emotions is something that's traditionally maybe, and I don't want to generalize, I don't like to do that, but I think traditionally it's been more perceived as a feminine characteristic of sorts. So, I think there's some changing in discussions with that over time, but that's still one of those cultural nuances that's evolving.
Yeah, and making it okay for men to be in touch with their emotions and communicate their emotions and
say and have the language to do so and understand what that means.
Go to therapy and be okay with that. Like, I think those are all new revelations. The pandemic did bring us some good things, I think, in society. And you're just seeing more and more people in this space of understanding themselves better and then being able to connect with others in different ways because of that. And then you're also seeing people choose different jobs because of that. And so there's just so much here. I'm sure people realize that Dave and I could talk for hours together. We often are like enthralled by each other's brains. So this is always a great conversation. I want to just close up by just saying, give yourself a quick commercial for, what you want people to understand about either Bethesda Green, Virtues Matters, how to connect with you. And if they were, if they liked your brain too, how did they get in touch with your work and be able to work with you and support you?
Yeah, I mean, Bethesda Green is a community organization. So reaching out to the people in the community, and if you're in the DMV, you want to do something with sustainability, reach out to us. My email is dave@bethesdagreen.org. If you're in the area, we have a co-working space. You're welcome to come into our space. We are trying to continue growing our communities. So that's really good. We're about to redo our website, so jump on our mailing list and see kind of interesting things. And if not in Bethesda, if you're in Baltimore and any other areas, or even across the country, I know this is a much broader geographic, get involved. Find a local organization. We do the unique things. There are others that are doing it well. Get involved with your community efforts, because they, as a nonprofit, are always looking for interested-minded people who bring different skills together. Everybody who's in the world of social impact, one, it'll benefit you. I mean, that pandemic taught us we need to be amongst other people. But two is that the world just needs groups of people coming together to build interesting solutions and approaches to our problems.
Oh, yeah. I think that's such a brilliant way to describe it. If you are anywhere in the world, there probably is some sort of group coming together to solve a problem. And you can join them. You can be part of that. Absolutely. Well, it's been wonderful to have you, Dave. Thank you so much for gracing us and just sharing everything with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendie. Thank you for all you do and your commitment to just elevating everybody and making them, be their best in every capacity.
Absolutely. That's what this podcast and this collective is all about. So thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. And we will be back really soon. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to having you come back. If you're curious about something we shared, make sure you check in the show notes below. And do you want the secret to make your nonprofit or business more sustainable and more profitable? Hop into my Learn, Grow, Thrive University, where I give you exclusive access to resources, mini courses, and templates for free. All you need to do is sign up at wendybelos.com/university. See you next episode.